Hello guys, and welcome back to another episode of Supercoach Mates. Well, as we're doing now, this is our Q&A podcast, and it's just Thomas and I tonight. So we're going to just get straight into it. So our first question we've got here is it worth trading Josh Rachele to Will Brodie? So Will Brodie's sort of picked up a little bit. He started off with only 60% time on ground, but last week he had 83, and Rachele only scored 36 on the weekend. So what do you think about this idea, Thomas? Rachele to Will Brodie? Personally, I'm against it, but I'd be interested to hear what you think.
Yeah, me too, unfortunately. Rachele, we both watched the game last week against Port Adelaide, and he was unfortunately on the end of a pretty harsh 50-metre penalty, which cost him about 10 to 12 points, whatever it was. So all of a sudden, when he, say Rachele scores a 56 instead of a 36, and you're not looking too bad. It's a 50k increase, so it's not the worst in the world. But you got to remember that Mundy and Sarong both didn't play last week, and they played West Coast as well. So I think the issue with Brodie is he's not going to kill you if you don't own him. I know Nathan and Jonas both own him as well. I don't have him. I've looked briefly about bringing him in, but I don't think he's a must-have. He's going to make you a fair bit of cash, obviously. If he continues scoring that way, he could well get to 400k. But I don't think he's going to bring out any 120s and 130s anytime soon, just because, as I said, you've got Mundy and Sarong back, whereas Rachele has the potential to still blow open a game, which could happen at any point. He's got a break even of 42, as you can see there on the screen, which is not ideal, because if he scores another 30-odd, then you're in trouble. But what are your thoughts, Nathan, on the Rachele to Brodie? I know you said you briefly didn't like it, but a bit more detail into that opinion.
Yeah, so basically, I know the 36 looks bad on the face value, but if you actually watch the game, so he gave away a 50-metre penalty basically at the end of the game, and that cost him 11 points. So all of a sudden that 36 becomes sort of a 50-odd. And then all of a sudden, I don't think you're considering trading him out at that price. And I think one correlation to look at is when their break even gets above their average. And right now his average is still at 70 and his break even's 42. So I still think he's got a little bit more to make. And unless you're absolutely certain that Will Brodie's going to be a keeper, which I'm not. I think Jonas and I spoke off camera about this. Obviously, Jonas isn't here tonight, but I think our plan is I think he's going to be one of the first ones that we actually get rid of in that forward line, just because I think, for me, I'm concerned about his time on ground, and also Mundy's not there, Sarong's not there, Fife's not there, so I think they will come back and eat into his scoring a bit. And I think if someone from that forward line like Isaac Heaney had another dud game, well, he's probably going to fall a little bit. So I think that's an ideal option. But yeah, I think just leave Rachele on the bench. Like if you've got Zeri, Brodie, and Martin, I think you can just have Rachele on the bench, and just leave him there. I don't think he's going to hurt you by keeping him. So I think that's sort of where I stand on that. So sort of similar to you there, Thomas. Next question. So, which defensive premium would you pick out of Lloyd, Stewart, and Dawson? Of course, Jonas's love child has to make a premium defender pick. Which one do you think, Thomas, out of those three?
Unfortunately, probably Dawson. As much as Jonas would like to hear that. He's one that both of us in the same in the same boat where we don't own him. And the first two rounds definitely looked not too bad. because he started off pretty badly. I think he barely scored in the opening quarters because he was playing a wing half forward role. And then he gets moved back into a half back and scores about 70 in a quarter, which is all well and good. But he's a pretty volatile player, as I've said in previous podcasts. He reminds me a bit of Dan Houston, where he gets shifted around a fair bit. You just don't know where he's going to play on the day. Hopefully for owners, he stays in the back half, which is where he scores. Having said that, he dominated against Port Adelaide, but obviously you can see there on the screen he scored 123. But having said that, about 20 of those points, close to 20 of those points, were attributed to his goal. So it's one of those things where it's a bit of a false score in the sense that he didn't get that 123 off, say, a 30 disposal game. It was more of that winning goal as well. But with regards to Lloyd and Stewart, I guess you can't really go wrong. As you can see, we've listed pretty big break evens for both of them. So Lloyd's 141 and Stewart's 130. So there's still coin to be lost with both of them. So you can probably pick him up at a cheaper price, whereas Dawson's going to hover around that kind of 520 to 540 mark, I think. Whereas Lloyd and Stewart are going to dip pretty considerably, I think. The issue with both Lloyd and Stewart, I guess you know what you're going to expect for them. You're not going to expect any lower than probably an 80, but I think both of them, they're really struggling to get above the 120s and 130s, especially Lloyd is what he used to be doing. But it'd be interesting to see what your thoughts are on those two in particular. I know you're a Stewart owner, Nathan. So what are your thoughts out of those three options
Tom
there?
Stewart owner. So I think Tom Stewart, well, obviously I've got Tom Stewart, so I'll be biased and say Tom Stewart. But I think Dawson, out of the three of them, I think he's definitely capable of being the highest scorer out of the three. But I think it depends on the makeup of your side. And I know we've been saying this about sort of Aaron Hall and stuff as well. But I think if you've got someone like a Lloyd and a Stewart, I think Dawson will be the way to go, given that he's capable of those higher scores. But I think if you've got someone, say, like Jaden Short and Aaron Hall, who can be more volatile with their scoring, then I think you're probably better off going with a Stewart or a Lloyd. You know you're going to get 100 just about every week. So I think it depends on the makeup, but gee, how could you trust Dawson? Honestly, he's played just about across the whole ground, and he literally goes missing in games, and then he just bobs up and gets 50 points in a quarter. So that's what I guess you're gonna get with Dawson. So, I guess that's what you're gonna get. So, it is what it is, I guess. So,
100%.
Okay, sorry about that. Right, next question. So, trade McGovern to Martin and Rochelle to English, or Stevens to Sinclair and McGovern to Martin. All right. What are your thoughts on this, Thomas? Which one would you be leaning towards? I've got one I'm leaning towards, but I'll let you go first.
I think, obviously he's got in both trade options, which is great. You don't want to miss out on his cash generation, and he looks like an actually very solid scorer on field at a bargain basement at 102k, which you can't really complain about. I'd probably lean towards the second one. I've been tinkering with my side to see how it looks with Sinclair, and I really rate Sinclair in the midfield, and I'm hoping he can stay there. Obviously, there is question marks when Zach Jones comes back and Hunter Clark and Billings is still a while off. There's still good cash to be made, and he's got two very easy opponents to score against, as in Hawthorn and Gold Coast, which could do quite well in. Obviously, the crux of the trade is Rochelle to English or Stevens to Sinclair. I think Rochelle is probably better to have on a bench than Stevens. Stephens could be dropped this week, I have a feeling. He played a really poor game last week, and he's one that is on the cusp of that 22, I think. He didn't really play much at all. And English, granted, he's probably going to be top six forward regardless. But I think you've got to keep in mind that he's jumped up a fair bit. He's going to keep jumping up in price. So it really depends if you want him or not. But he does play a couple teams which double up on decent ruckman. So Nank and Ivan Soldo for Richmond, and St Kilda didn't really do much with their rucks. I mean, we played well, but Supercoach wise, Marshall didn't score well. Ryder didn't score well against them. Whereas Sinclair, I think, can be pretty solid for kind of a 90 to 100 score. But I'd probably, if I had the option, if in that trade, I'd go Stevens and Gov to Sinclair and Martin. What are your thoughts, Nathan?
Yeah, I'd be doing the Stevens to Sinclair and Gov to Martin as well. I think Sinclair's probably going to go up in money, whereas I think English is possibly. I feel like you're chasing points if you're getting Tim English. Like, I don't think he's going to be 521,000.
No.
All year. I think you'll be able to get him for a cheaper price at some point. And I think like he could be a good upgrade option for Tristan Xerri in a few weeks once Xerri stops scoring as well as he is. But yeah, I think for the minute, I think Sinclair's probably going to be just about one of the best buyers this week, because I think he's going to probably end up as a top 6 defender if he gets that defender eligibility. And I think that break even of 62 is probably going to go above that. So in saying that, English's break even's only 58, so his is lower, but yeah, I think Sinclair probably long term is less volatile if he's got a consistent role. So I think that's probably where I would stand on that. But yeah, I think Nick Martin's must have.
Yeah,
I think his break even is like minus 140 something ridiculous. So, and the thing about him is he can play anywhere, Nick Martin. So, 124. So you can really play anywhere on the ground. I've seen him in forward line. I've seen him on the wing. So, I don't think you can go wrong with Nick Martin there. So this is another question. Shout out to myself. This is actually my question. So is it too late to jump on someone whose price has changed? There was a little bit missing from this question, which I'll add in there. So the question itself is it too late to jump on someone whose price has changed? If you think that they're capable of finishing as a top 6 to 8 player in their position. So I use Lipinski, Lipinski, Hewitt, Cripps, and Rao as an example. What do you think about this, Thomas?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it really depends on whether you think they're going to be top 6 to 8 in their line, and obviously for midfielders, it's whether you think they're going to be top 8 to 10 in their category. Just looking off the list that obviously you have, probably the only one I'd be jumping on is Cripps. Just because of how dominant he seems, and he seems like a top 8 to 10 midfielder, and he's expected to jump a ton again. He's got a break even of 26. Hewitt's probably next in line, because I was skeptical about how it would look with all 4 midfielders. So you got Chera, Hewitt himself, Cripps, Walsh, and Kennedy as well playing more mid-time. But it definitely seems like he's still capable. I know he ended up at halftime on like 35 and then ended up on a 117 score. So he's very capable of finding the ball, and I don't think he's going to be pushed out of that midfield. The other two, Rao and Lipinski, I'll probably have Lipinski lower down. At 400k, it's a pretty awkward price. He's already jumped up a fair bit, and I don't think he has the highs of the other mids. He'd be a bit of that awkward price. He's definitely playing that mid role, but whether he can sustain it for the 22 season. And Rao is the other one that I guess you probably missed that initial jumper game, but I'm assuming most people have him anyway. But if you didn't, I wouldn't go chasing. I don't think he's going to score you those 130s as consistently. And now, again, at 400k, you're looking at him as a genuine mid-price, or as a keeper, rather than the rookie, but I wouldn't say rookie base, but lower mid-price that he had before the price rise. But I'd probably have Cripps as the one if you don't have. This is probably the last week that you can own him if you're confident he can finish as a top paid 10 mid. But what are your thoughts on those ones? I know you missed out on the Hewitt boat because you forgot to flip the trade. But is he one that you're still wanting to bring in at 453k, or is he one that you're going to probably pass up on?
I don't know. I'm just waiting for him to have a bad game.
Yeah.
In all honesty, I was really happy he was on 35 at halftime, and then Carlton, a bit like Collingwood the night before, they just basically stopped and let Hawthorn back in the game. And of course, the way that the scoring works is that when the game's closer, you get sort of a bit of a boost depending on what you do. So that definitely helped his scoring. So look, I think he at this stage he's looking like a top 6 defender. It's just a question of whether or not I want to go down that path. I would still probably get rid of Whitfield. I'm still not sure about him. I know he got 96 on the weekend, but I guess this is a lesson for all those people out there is to not sleep in.
Yeah.
And make sure that you do the trades, because this is a last minute trade I was going to do. I had it lined up, and then I didn't wake up till 1:45 when the game started, and then it was too late. So I think if you're going to do something like that, just make sure you're awake to do it. But
that's a good tip as well.
Yeah, I think Hewitt is someone who probably could just about throw in a Crips basket, but I probably would say this is the last week you can get on Hewitt as well. I think he's going to go up
100%.
another 20k, so he's almost going to go up 100k on his start price. So yeah, I think this is his last week. But anyway, that's one I'll live and learn about. Another question here, is the 6-6-6 rule letting forwards play a more friendly role?
Supercoach related.
Yeah, so Supercoach friendly roles. So examples: Heaney, Butters, Taranto, Cornelio. And does this have a correlation to why this year is more based on the prices? What do you think about this, Thomas? I definitely think, just looking at the game, I definitely think that sides have adapted to this 6-6-6 rule. I think it took them a couple of years to work out how to unlock it, and I think they have now. And I think this is why we're seeing these, especially these forwards that are playing in the midfield, just dominating Cornelio, Heaney, and whatnot. But what do you think about this?
It's an interesting question that got brought up. I don't think it's a correlation to why this year might be based on mid prices, because these forwards are priced not necessarily on mid-price standards. They're just fallen primos that have suffered a fair bit with injury and things like that. But definitely with regards to 6-6-6 rule, you've got, so Butters are probably removed out of that bracket because he's primarily playing mid. But Heaney, Taranto and Cogs again playing mid as well, predominantly, and at times forward. But I think if you look at Heaney and Taranto per se, that kind of high half forward role that those two play quite well, I think they're pushing up quite a fair bit into the mid rotations. So they're pushing into what Tom Mitchell did quite well when he got tagged, was he'd start half forward and then push into the midfield as another midfielder and cause havoc. And I think this is what Heaney and Taranto are doing in particular, and that's why they're getting so much cheap possession, because they're kind of getting lost in the play by the defenders, and all of a sudden they've got the outlet kicks towards them, and they're the ones that are sending it into the forward 50, and they're being so damaging as well because they can score. But I think the other thing that's also helped with let me just bring up this site so I can see. The other thing that's predominantly helped with the 6-6-6 rule, and I think it's been so for a while now, it's just the key forwards, like your true centre half forwards, are getting a lot more space in the forward 50 to lead and dominate. So, I mean, this is obviously a very small sample size from looking this round only, but you just look at key forwards. You got Buddy Franklin scored 100. Supercoach points against the Dogs with 2 goals, 1. You had Max King tearing a quarter open. You had, who else did you have?
Tim Membry got 89. Yeah, Jesse Hogan got 109.
Peter Wright got 92 after, scoring 4 goals in a quarter pretty much. Then you've got the likes of Jeremy Cameron, who kicked 6 against your mob. And even Tom Hawkins not doing too badly.
Even Mason Wood got 96.
Yeah. Mason Wood was more for wing. But yeah, it's one of those roles where there's a lot more space for players to get the ball in their hands, and the forward line so much more open. So you're seeing the key forwards not being congested and not being having 3 guys fly for the ball and in that position when it's starting from the centre bounce. Obviously, in open play, it's a bit different. But yeah, I think the 6-6-6 rule just allows a bit more freedom for those forwards to lead into open space. I don't think that's correlated necessarily with Supercoach must-haves, but I guess with regards to this question, Heaney and Taranto in particular, I'd say the 2 high half forwards who are playing currently in that position to push a lot more into that midfield and really cause chaos. But yeah, that's just my 2 cents worth in that question.
Yeah, Jay, I'm glad I've got Cornelio. I know he's in 75% of sides, but Jay, he's early on the signs that he's back. And I think he might just about be a keeper this year at his price, which was an amazing buy. But I think 100%. So far he's looking like a keeper, which is amazing for $260,000. But anyway, is Bruce a must-have next week, or who would you consider that are popular options to bring him in? I'll just say my 2 cents worth. I'm not going near him. I'll let Thomas explain his answer, and then I'm going to say why.
Yeah, Bruce, I think there's only a few limited reasons why you'd bring him in. So one of them being if you have Tim English as a starter pick, all of a sudden you can flip Tim English into the forward line, say Rochelle has another poor game, and you bring Bruce for Rochelle. That's a really good option, I think. But if you've gone the set and forget route, the only reason I'd put that, even then it's I think that the thing with him is he's only 200k. So if he plays consistently for, say, a 6-week period, all of a sudden he's made you a fair bit of cash. So very similar to Matt Flynn if you didn't start him and then put him as a bench option. Obviously, Flynn was, I think, 123k last year and did exactly the same thing and provided decent bench cover. However, he did look impressive against Gold Coast, I must say. So I didn't even realise Flynn didn't play that game. So 109 Supercoach points, off 16 disposals, 5 marks, 34 hitouts, had 2 behinds, had the scoring on the board as well. And against Jared Witt's, definitely not a ruckman to frown upon. He's a premier ruckman of the competition as well. But it's just hard with Bruce. Came back off a shocking injury, which took him so long to recover, and I don't think he's going to play consistently. I think they've got the luxury of playing Flynn, and they can play in tandem against some other ruck combinations. I think if we saw this score with Flynn in the side, I'd be a little bit more comfortable. But I think he is playing this week. I'm pretty confident that it's either going to be a tandem ruck with Flynn or Bruce by himself. So it's definitely not a bad move to bring him in. If you could have, a Hayes or Dixon gets dropped all of a sudden and you bring Bruce into a bench position, it's probably not the worst thing in the world because you're just gaining cash pretty quickly then. But I definitely wouldn't make any drastic moves unless, say, Gawn, looks like he's losing even more ruck time all of a sudden, or Grundy's injured or Gawn's injured. Then you're bringing in Bruce to go for a bit of a cheaper route. But I don't think you don't need to do any drastic measures on field. But on the bench, I wouldn't frown upon it, especially with the likes of Dixon and Hayes playing at the moment. There's a bit of cover. Like, obviously, if Dixon and Hayes didn't play and they were just dead rookies to start with, I wouldn't entertain bringing in Bruce and then flipping them to the forward line because all of a sudden your forward line bench looks a bit iffy. But if Dixon and one of Dixon and Hayes can keep their spot, then I think Bruce isn't a bad money-making option for the short period. But I wouldn't be too confident about putting him on field. What is your thoughts on that, Nathan? Obviously, you're not a fan of Bruce at all, but do you want to elaborate a bit more on that?
Okay, so I think I'll go along with what you said. I think if you're bringing him in as an R2, I think you're waiting for trouble. I know this option got thrown around a few weeks ago about getting rid of Max Gawn for Jack Hayes. And that's backfired on anyone who did that, because I think Hayes has pretty much scored a 50 and a 60. And Gawn's obviously not scoring what he was, but he's still scoring higher than Hayes. So I think if you're bringing him in on the field, I think you're asking for trouble. I think if you're bringing him in on the bench, though, I think that's a different story. I think Jack Hayes is maybe just about at the end. I think he's going to go up another. I know he's due to go up another 40,000 with a score of 84. So I'm hoping he can get to about maybe 220, and then he gets dropped, and then Bruce can come in and take over that R3 role, and then you're laughing. So I definitely wouldn't be putting him on the field, but I think at R3 he's probably not a bad option.
Yeah, 100%.
So anyway, is Tom Green the real deal? Plan is to trade Berry to Green, Marshall to English, and Hinge to McCoynes. What do you think about this, Thomas? This is interesting. What do you think about it?
I like 2 out of the 3 options. Do not like the third option. I think that third option, it actually enables the other two. So Berry to Green's not the worst move in the world if you look at it in isolation. Berry, I don't like keeping at the moment.
I'm glad I avoided that.
Yeah, the thing is with Berry, like, he scored the first round. You kind of take out of consideration because he scored 69 and had a shoulder injury. So you don't blame him for that. Next round, he scored 76, which isn't too bad. He did some tagging roles, but it almost, like, I watched a bit of that game and he just didn't seem to be around. And somehow, I think because of scaling, almost got to 76. And a very similar thing happened in the third round where he started like a house on fire game against North. It looked dreadful. Ended up on 55 at halftime and barely looked at it. I think, again, that 83 was predominantly probably like 10 points of the scaling, which he got because he did so well in the first quarter. So I like the first one. I like the second one because I think Paddy Ryder back has ruined Marshall's Supercoach potential.
Yes.
Because Marshall looks a lot stronger as a forward. And that was what I was saying in previous podcasts. When Ryder goes in, Marshall plays predominantly forward alongside with Hayes. Ryder's a much better tap ruckman. Marshall's still got a fair bit to learn when it comes to tap ruck work, and it's shown he is improving. He did some really nice tap work stuff against Freo, but he's still a young developing ruckman, but he looks so damaging as a forward for us in the air. The one I don't like is Hinge to McGuinness. Obviously, you might have some more intel, Nathan, being a Collingwood supporter. I think he's talking about Reef McGuinness, who debuted last week. He actually didn't look too bad. But Hinge has actually stepped up to be half a decent Supercoach player. I don't really like the pick to start off with his elevated price tag, but I think social media swayed me a little bit because he seemed to be locked in a wing role, so his job security was quite good. Started a bit slowly with a 50 odd to start off the season, but he's definitely warmed up into his position. Ended up with a 90 odd against Port Adelaide, which was quite impressive, and looks pretty solid in that wing role, moving into a half-back role as well. So he definitely knows how to use the ball. But I think that trade, I'm assuming it's because Hinge to McInnes gets you the money for the other two. But if you're able to go Berry to Green, Marshall to English as a two-way trade, I'd be much more entertained. I have my doubts on Green as a player as well for top 8 to 10. But I guess you can expand more on that. But I think if you're able to just do the first two, it's not too bad. The third one I definitely wouldn't touch because McGuinness as well, he's got 1 week until his price rise. So he's one that you don't really want to touch. He seems to be okay from a non-Collingwood supporter bias. But what are your thoughts, Nathan, on that three-way trade? And more so specifically we talked English a fair bit, but Green and McInnes as well. What are your thoughts on those two?
Yeah, I think I'd only do one of those trades. I think I'd just do Marshall straight to English if you can. There's only a 15k price difference, so I think that's one I would entertain. The other two, so I think there's better options than Tom Green, I think, at that price. I know the Phantom's really big on Tom Green.
Yeah.
And this could be his breakout year. But I'm sort of someone who, unless he shows he's going to be top 8, and he's done it before, I'd be really hesitant about paying 500,000 for him when Patrick Cripps is, I don't know, what is he, like 15k more expensive, has been there, has done it. And I don't think he's going to be too impacted by scoring Cripps. Whereas I think Tom Green, I think there's still a question mark on Toby Green. There's still a question mark over what that Giants side looks like when he gets back in. So obviously I know Taranto's playing more midfield at the minute, but is he going to have to go more forward when Green comes back? Is Tom Green going to have to go forward more? So I think there's too many question marks about his role. But right now, I think he's definitely a form player in the competition, Tom Green. There's no doubt about it. And the third trade, so one of the biggest mistakes that people make is they jump on players after one game. So classic example here. So I think a few seasons ago, there was a Gold Coast player, came out, scored 100 on debut, and everyone jumped on him. And then he got dropped for his second game, and he didn't play again for the rest of the year. And people had burnt a trade getting him in off his first game. So I don't think McKines is going to keep his spot in that Collingwood side anyway. And he still has a break even of -37. So he's definitely not ready to go, Hinge. He's still got plenty more money to make. And McKines could come out this week and rupture an ACL. And then you've wasted a trade getting someone in who's not on the bubble. So I'd like to see one more game from McKines, but I'm not certain he's going to keep his spot in that side long term.
It's fair enough. I think that out of the three, the Hinge, McInnes or McKines, however you pronounce it, is the worst one out of the three. And I think that kind of stuffs up the other two, I'm assuming. And
I think
Hinge
if you can
is almost a... What were you going to say? Yeah.
I think looking at this, I think the money from, I think Marshall to English, these players capable of doing. Because I don't know how, like Berry to Green, like that's how much is Berry's? Just below 300k, isn't he, Berry? So that's a 200k trade. So they can definitely do Marshall to English. I think I'd be doing that for the minute, and leaving the other two for another time. But that's just myself.
I totally agree on what you say. Do you want to actually, before we move on to that last question, I think Michael's his name that sent through this question. Can you just pop open his team? We'll have a little bit of a gander. He sent that through and wanted some input on his side to see where it's at. So I think he sent it as a screenshot, which hopefully will load up well on your computer.
Hang on. No, I've got it. Hang on. I can only show one photo at a time. All right, so that's the first photo. I'm just trying to see if I can actually get this. Can I get this?
We can see it.
Can I get this so that they both show?
I don't know, stress.
I think I might only be able to get it so that one shows.
Yeah, we can flick between the two. That's all right.
Well, I've got one up anyway, and the second one. Yeah, it's only going to let me do one.
Yeah, that's
fine.
But yeah, just looking at the side, I think he's obviously got 29 trades left, which is like, I think he's used all 3 trades from the trades that he suggested beforehand. I'm not too sure.
Need to slow down on these trades, buddy.
Yeah, it seems like it. But it seems like he's done the English move, and I believe it was the Tom Green move in. It seems like this one he's able to do it without Hinge, which is good. I'm not exactly sure if we can able to bring it over to the forward line as well. Just flicking across just to see where we can identify what he's done with the third trade.
So it looks like Rochelle's gone.
Rochelle's gone for maybe it would be McKines.
Yeah.
In. So I guess, yeah, probably not the worst thing in the world. Just looking at your team, there's no one really. It's a pretty solid side. You've got English now. You've got Green. If you're a fan of Green, I guess go for it. We have our doubts, myself and Nathan. If there's someone else, Lipinski at 100k cheaper might not be the worst shout. Even if you leave Green out, and at 500k you can get a fair few defenders who will look much more top 6 ready rather than a top 8 to 10 like a Green. But if you're able to do that without sacrificing Hinge, you're well on your way. I'd say McKines might be worth the risk there if you're doing that. But maybe, as Nathan said, if you're risking McKines to get a Green, maybe just stick with the Rowan Marshall to English trade and save your trades, because you've used a boost as well. You only get, as we said early on in our podcast, you only get 5 of them for the season. So you've got to be pretty smart when using them. And you've already got 29 trades left. So you probably
need to slow down a bit.
Yeah. You're probably a trade or two behind where most people are at. And you've got to remember, most people will be trying to trade in the likes of McRae if they don't have him, Took Miller, when their prices start to drop with their poor scoring already in the system now or soon to be. So, yeah, it's one that probably if you want to trade this week, probably Rowan Marshall down to English, because I think Rowan Marshall almost is a must trade out. But yeah, I wouldn't entertain the other two per se, just because you want to be careful. Like, you've got 35 trades, which is a fair bit, but you also want to be careful that you're not going too crazy with them too early, just to get to the whole point of primos, where you've got to be careful of how you define what a primo is.
Yeah, I think I'm the same too. I think, is this the person who asked the last question? Is this his side?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So I think, having a look at this side, I think I would definitely just do the the Marshall to English trade. And I would just leave the other two. I think having 31 trades at this stage, I think, is a good place to start. And as I said about bringing players in after one game, they might get dropped. Like McKines might get dropped this week.
Yeah.
And then you've basically wasted a trade to get him in, when you could have just waited another week. So
yeah, 100%.
Yeah, I think that's where I sit on that. But yeah, I think overall this is a good side, and I think if you can conserve the other two trades, and get in English, I think this is a pretty good side going forward. So well done to you, Michael. I think his name was. Well done to you, Michael.
Yeah.
But yeah, just slow down a bit on the trades, buddy.
But I guess we'll move on to the last question before we wrap up.
Just let me get it back up.
Get back onto it.
There we go. Here we go. So the last question here, is it more beneficial to go aggressive or to hold your trades, especially with the ability to utilize the trade boosts? Thomas,
it's a good question, because I think people, we spoke about this last podcast when we did our initial round 3 trades, about the whole thing where people are saying, don't you risk using your trade boosts early and you're going to waste them, only use it for COVID. Who knows what this whole COVID situation will present itself in a couple months' time, when we're in a full-on winter season, and all of a sudden it could be multiple players from one team, which is quite Supercoach relevant, miss out. At the moment, we seem to be missing one or two players a week, but they're not really Supercoach relevant at this stage. But we just don't know what the future holds. So I think before Nathan jumps in, I think you just got to be. You can be aggressive to a point, but you've just got to be careful of what the aggressiveness is. So if you're aggressiveness is to bring in, say, a Green, Sinclair, all at once, you've got to be careful because you're bringing them in now to keep for the rest of the season. So, I would say a smart idea being aggressive would be maybe doubling down on rookies in a couple of weeks' time and bring a McRae in, or like a rookie down, and even bring in a McRae and a fallen Jake Lloyd, for example, something like that. But I wouldn't be too aggressive for the sake of just bringing in players to complete a side, because then all of a sudden, when people are slowly chipping away and bringing in McRae's, bringing in your Millers, bringing in your Steels at fallen prices, people are having to waste another trade to then bring them in because, realistically, if you're bringing in guys like a Tom Green, a Travis Boak, for example, if they're not all of a sudden slowing down, you're going to have to sideways to a Took Miller and a McRae and use another trade. So realistically, you're just going to burn through trades. So obviously, if there's options available, but I just don't think we've got the rookies present at the moment. Maybe give it a couple of weeks, we might have some more, but don't go aggressive for the sake of being so, because you're putting yourself in a vulnerability where you're bringing in rookies way too early. Like we've already had one now where Sam Skinner, like I brought him in for the sake of having to move McInerney on, but Skinner's now, I think he injured his ankle, but he's now admitted. That's what it says in the AFL website anyway. So who knows, even get sicky again, and you've just lost the opportunity for them to gain money. But what are your thoughts, Nathan? Obviously, it's a pretty, it's a pretty polarized opinion because you've got either going aggressive or conservative with holding your trade. But I'm assuming you're in the similar sentiment that holding your trades at the end of the day is the way to go.
Yeah, I mean, you've only got 35 of them. And you do go through them quite quickly. And I like to sort of do a lot of, I think if you're going into buys, that's the time when I think you want to use the boosts. Because you might end up with, I know in the past they've done 3 trades over bye weeks. So I think if they bring that back again, then you'll have 4 trades in those weeks. So you could potentially do 12 trades. And I think most people will do a good chunk of those 12 trades. Like they'll probably do 9 to 10 if they're capable of doing 4 trades for those bye weeks. And have these McRae's, have these Millers that they know are probably going to be top 8 midfielders, top 6 defenders, top 6 forwards. I think it's just too early in the season to pinpoint exactly who these top players will be. There's obviously some that are standing out at the minute. So Tom Green is an example, but whether or not he can keep this up with Green in the side and with perhaps Taranto playing, perhaps with himself playing forward a bit more to accommodate Toby Green. I don't know, but I hope for his sake that he does stay in the midfield. But I don't think, I think even if he is a top 8 midfielder, I think he's still going to come down at some point. Maybe not to where he is now. But I think if you're jumping on him now, I think you're just chasing his points with Tom Green. Whereas I think with someone like, say, Took Miller, I think Took Miller's shown that he's probably going to be a top 8 midfielder. I know he basically got double tagged last weekend. But I think the 2 weeks before that, he was easily probably Gold Coast's best player the last 2 weeks before that. So, yeah, I guess you want to try and go after players, but I think they've got to be the right players. Like if you're going to get rid of a rookie, I think the only rookie trade you'd consider this week is Rochelle down to Nick Martin. I think Nick Martin, you've got to have Nick Martin. So if you've got to get rid of a rookie to get in Nick Martin, then do that. If Rochelle's your option, then go with Rochelle. But otherwise, I don't think there's any rookies that I'm too eager to move on at this stage. Just because I still think they've all got money to make, and you want to try and squeeze every last cent out of these rookies before you move them on. I think it's all about timing as well. So like, as I said earlier in the podcast, so my plan is to use Will Brodie and hope that Isaac Heaney can have another sort of down game around an 80 mark. Although I think they are playing North Melbourne, so I'm not sure exactly how that's going to work. He could score 160 odd against North Melbourne, but I hope he has another low game. And then Will Brodie to Isaac Heaney in a couple of weeks' time will be probably the most popular trade if that happens, and I'll be jumping on that. So I think that's sort of where I stand on that. But then again, I am the most conservative player you will meet on Supercoach, so I still haven't used any trades at all. So yeah, that's sort of where I stand on it. So anyway.
Yeah, so before we wrap it up, we'll quickly go through our VC and C and trade options. So we'll start off in Nathan quickly. I know you've said you've been pretty conservative, but what are your thoughts on trades and your VC and C going into round 4?
Yeah, I'm still tempted by the Whitfield to Hewitt trade. The same trade I was going to do last week. Obviously, I'm going to lose 100k on it from what I could have got last week. But I'm not sure about Whitfield. I did watch that Giants game, and there was one instant in the back line where he just didn't run for the ball. It was right next to him. He just didn't run for it, and I think the only reason he ended up getting that 96 was I think in the second half he played a little bit more attacking, and I think that helped him. Whereas at this stage, Hewitt is definitely on track to be a top 6 defender based on his scoring. And I think his role is pretty safe. He's sort of playing the quarterback role, where he's the sort of the defensive midfielder at the stoppages. And he's sort of running off the back once Carlton get the ball. So I think that's a pretty safe role. So it's sort of like the quarterback role. So I think that's a pretty safe role for Supercoach. So I'm still tempted by that trade. Other than that, I'm not really certain on anyone else at this stage that I'm going to get rid of. I still think I have all the right rookies. I've got Hinge, I've got Francis, I've got Dacos. Stevens is a bit of an interesting one, but I don't think he's going to get dropped. I think he might keep his spot. And I think he might have a good game against North Melbourne. I've got Brodie, Cherry, Martin. So there's no one else I really want to get rid of. So I guess I'll just keep conserving the trades.
Yeah, that's fair.
So captaincy, so I'd love to do a loophole, but I think at the current rate, I don't think it's going to be possible. So I think for me, I think I'm just going to chuck the C on probably either Cripps or Jack Steele and just watch them go. But I would like to VC McRae, but I just don't think I'm going to be able to do it. So I think for me, probably the captaincy on probably Cripps or Steele for me this week.
Yeah. So
what about yourself?
Yeah, before we go into that, I think our you're sharing our recording, so I think that's been a bit bust at the moment. But
hang on.
Whilst Nathan fixes up that one, there we go. Trade wise, I want to really realistically get rid of Berry. But I don't really have many options to go. Like I can go Berry straight to Brodie, which is an option that I've been tinkering with. Another option is to potentially go early on McGinn's as an option, which I don't really like. And then bring in Sinclair, but that's toiled with laced with a fair bit of risk. So I probably won't even trade this round and just keep the 100k for next week when there's a few more options on the bubble. And I don't think Sinclair goes too crazy up in price, but we'll see. VC and captaincy, it's a bit annoying because I know Sam Skinner got omitted, but he's playing tomorrow night. His port's playing tomorrow night. Sorry. So it makes it fairly difficult to actually loop him. It's basically impossible, which makes it frustrating. So I'll probably take the punt on Heaney against North Melbourne as a VC if there is potential for a loophole. Hopefully maybe a Dixon or Hayes gets dropped potentially. If that's the case, then I'll do that probably into, as Nathan said, either Cripps or Steele, but probably Steele against Hawthorns on a bad bet with Ryder in the ruck against Ned Reeves. But that's all for this week. That's all we've got time for. From now on in, if you've got teams to send through, we're more than happy to share through. We're still trying to figure out the best method to project them. But ideally, if you don't send them on a mobile screenshot, that would be probably appreciated. Probably the screenshot on your computer is probably the safer bet, so it's easy for us to access.
And we can see both screens.
Yeah, exactly. And good luck for round 4, and hopefully we don't get as much midfield carnage as we did last week. And we'll see you until then for the round 4 review on probably Monday.
Go Pies.